we hot, fellas? We rolling? We hot? Okay. Ruby, let me hand that back to the ladies so we can go. Thank you.
Go ahead. Okay.
This is the Wynton Marsalis interview at the tennis club on Friday night. Mr. Marsalis, could you please describe how the New Orleans tradition is influencing your music, particularly your new material as represented on Majesty of the Blues?
Well, the main thing about the New Orleans tradition is that it allows for individual expression, and the more individual expression, the more you know also how to play with the group. So in the New Orleans style, we find very deep similarities to how democracy is supposed to work. What I'm trying to do is incorporate all of the sophistication from the New Orleans style and attempt to create a style that's as comprehensive as the style that Duke Ellington developed. Of course, not saying that I hope to be on the level of the master, but just that in the New Orleans music we find seeds of things that have influenced all of American music.
Mr. Marsalis, Louis Armstrong is often portrayed as the father of jazz soloist improvisation. You feel this is correct?
So Louis Armstrong is definitely the father of all the great soloists, and not only the soloists, but also he had a tremendous influence on composition. Duke Ellington always said that he wanted to have somebody playing like Louis Armstrong on every instrument, on bass, drums, piano, trumpet. And in Louis Armstrong we find he's the mythic hero of the New Orleans style. He's the one who brings all of the key information from that style, the 15 or 20 years of music that existed before Armstrong was born. He synthesizes all of that music and boils it down into a style that became palatable for everybody, and all the musicians imitated him.
This is a loaded question. As a child, were you exposed to the music of Danny Barker and George Lewis and Sidney Bechet and the other traditional stars of jazz?
When I was a youngster, I was exposed to the music, but I didn't like it because I grew up and I only liked what was on the radio or what was on TV. So my father would be talking about Louis Armstrong and all that, but to me they were just old men who played music. And as I grew older, I met Mr. Albert Murray, who's here tonight and who we'll get a chance to hear a little something from, and he started to make me really understand the importance of tying yourself into your legacy and your culture so that your music can have a rich sound and a sound of flow, rather than just be cut off from the rest of the history and just sound like a fad or something.
What are the differences between your style and Armstrong, considering that in between came Clark Terry, Diz, Miles, Clifford Brown, Freddie Hubbard, and so many other important musical artists?
Well, the first thing is nobody can be compared to Armstrong because he's the one who, all the trumpet players who came after him interpreted some aspect of his personality. And he's a world of information. So, I mean, I wouldn't reduce Louis Armstrong by comparing myself to him. You know, he's the greatest genius ever on trumpet. He has no equal, and we all just try to play whatever percentage of him that we can understand.
Do you feel that Armstrong's musical influence works on today's jazz music? Do you feel it?
Well, anything today that's jazz, yeah. Armstrong's music is like water is. As long as people are alive, they're gonna need that. So, you know, the question is not whether Armstrong's music is an influence. The question should be whether today's jazz is jazz if it's not addressing Louis Armstrong. Because he's that key and central to the music. If you don't have him in your music, then it might not be jazz. Well, it won't be jazz. I'm sorry, it won't be jazz.
Did your family encourage you when you first started?
I mean, my family was encouraging, but I have 5 brothers, and you know we were trying to deal with a lot of different things. My father was trying to work, but my mother and father always made me understand that if I wanted to practice and study, then of course they would support me.
I know that you teach, Mr. Marsalis. Is it more gratifying to play or to teach?
Well, I want Mr. Murray to come down here. Al, you want to come down here and get a little piece of this? This is Albert Murray. This is a great teacher. This is a man who taught me as much as I know, which is very little, but I'm still trying to learn from him. And when I came into contact with this man and his writings, he wrote many great books, but the book that's really important for musicians to read is one of Mr. Murray's books entitled Stompin' the Blues. So it's important to teach and play.
Mr. Murray, do you remember when you first met Wynton? Do you remember your exchange?
Couldn't have been a long time ago. He was a very young man.
How young was he?
About 22 or 3, something like that. I didn't teach him what key to play in. I didn't put my hand on his horn. We just talked about the context. He had come from the European concert hall tradition of music, so he already knew you dealt with total context. So when we start pointing out what elements actually existed in his own context, he had something to bring to that. And when he approached that the same way that he did Bach or Mozart or anything else, he saw that you developed by extending, elaborating, and refining the idiomatic particulars of your most immediate experience. That's what happened to him.
Did you, in your initial introduction, when you first met and worked, did you feel this great talent emerging as time went by?
Oh, there's no question about it. He was phenomenal then. I mean, he could conquer the world at that point. It was just a matter of focusing that talent on something indigenous and seeing that in a large context, in the largest possible context. And that's what he has done. This is probably the only trumpet player who can play with authority in all of the styles of jazz, and also has read the major works of Thomas Mann, has read the Iliad and the Odyssey, has read great books on mythology and so forth, and he sees that in terms of coming to terms with himself.
You sound like you might be his father.
Hey, this is my grandfather. I love this man. I mean, this is the man who turned,
How do you feel about Louis Armstrong, what he contributed to our traditional music?
Well, he is the Prometheus of the music world and of contemporary sensibility in music. He's the one that stole fire from the gods and brought it and made it a property. And just as Wynton was saying, I mean, you can't get to...
Your way back to your seats will get underway in just a couple of minutes. Thank you.
Let me start that again. How do you feel about Louis Armstrong's contribution to American music?
He is the Prometheus of that which is truly American in music, that aspect of American music which has conquered the world, as everybody in the world wants to sound like American jazz. Well, he is to American music what, let's say, Chaucer was to English literature. You don't get Shakespeare until you get Chaucer. You don't get Ellington until you get Armstrong. And Wynton is going to be Armstrong and Ellington.
Let me ask you one loaded question before we wrap up. How do you both feel about the electronic influence into the jazz world? I talked to Jerry Mulligan about it, and Jerry Mulligan is rabid. He thinks, as we all feel, jazz has to come from the soul, not from an electric chip on a keyboard. How do you guys feel about that?
Well, it's more of an intrusion than anything else. But the thing about the musical sensibility, it just might turn anything into music. See, ultimately, just the fact that it's a gimmick or something and you can sell it should not be confused with the real influence it might have on music sensibility. Because even commercials, if every now and then you make a mistake and you get a real musician, it'll make real music out of commercial. Anything can be processed into music by a fine musician.
What is your opinion on it, Mr. Marsalis?
Well, I feel that I don't feel that they're the most expressive instruments, but I agree. I have to agree with my teacher, Mr. Murray. I mean, if you get somebody who really knows what to do with it, then it can work. For me personally, if you look at the fact that Beethoven, at the end of his life, said he wasn't writing for the piano after the Hammer Clavier Sonata because he felt the piano was not an expressive enough instrument for what he was hearing. I think that the piano is much more expressive than the synthesizers are. But I think that if we keep developing that technology, perhaps one day the instruments will be capable of great expression. But it's more a matter of the musician and the type of consciousness that's behind it than the actual instrument itself.
What's ahead for Wynton Marsalis? What's the future like?
I'm going to Mr. Murray's house and get a good fruit cake on Sunday.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right. All right, thank you.
Good. Thank you very much, Mr. Murray.